Without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce you to Bryce Embry. Bryce is a manager and PHP programmer who leads multiple software development teams at the very prestigious Vanderbilt University Medical Center in Nashville, Tennessee. He's passionate about improving code quality and building strong team relationships. So without any further ado, Bryce, take it away.
Awesome. Thank you. It's been an amazing morning. I missed a lot of it. I was asleep because I'm in Nashville, but I came in right after lunch and heard some great technical presentations on machine learning and scaling. And I guess we're closing out the conference then talking about people. I am a manager of application development at Vanderbilt University Medical Center. And I want to talk about some lessons I've learned in how to lead brilliant developers. So I want to start though by talking about, I want to start by getting my computer to work here. I want to start by talking about how to, wouldn't you know it? All right, there we go. I want to start by talking about a great basketball team. In 1992, the International Basketball Federation, for the first time ever, allowed the United States to send our professional basketball players to the Olympics. So in 1992, we sent what was called the Dream Team. It was made up of people who, if you're a guy like me who didn't know the names of any basketball players, these were the names you did know. It was Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen and Magic Johnson and Larry Bird and Patrick Ewing and Charles Barkley and Karl Malone and a bunch of people I don't know still. But it was the best of the best in terms of basketball players. This is who we decided to send to the Olympics. And this team got together. They weren't folks who were used to playing together. They had played for different teams up to this point. And as part of their training, the first game they went out to was just a practice game against a college team. So they went up against some college students who were just awed to be with these professionals. And the college team did really well. They got 62 points during the game. The Dream Team, on the other hand, this team of professional basketball players who are at the peak of their game, this team of the best, this Dream Team got 54 points. The Dream Team, even though they had all this skill, all this ability, all this potential, could not win against college students. And I bring this up because it's a lesson to everyone who works in technology, especially to managers and leaders who I'll mostly be speaking to today. But it's a lesson that talent is not enough. Just having talented people on your team does not make your team successful. In this talk, what I want to talk about, or what I want to cover, is I started managing technical teams in 2004. And I originally, like so many other people, thought the trick was you hire smart people and just leave them alone and you'll end up with a winning team. But the more I worked with really smart, talented people, the more I discovered that even brilliant people struggle. They struggle in different ways than other people maybe, but they do struggle. And you can't just leave them alone to do whatever, because like everyone else, they need a coach, they need a leader, they need help. And the more I worked with people who are in technology and who are just brilliant people, the more I saw patterns to how they struggled. And over time, and trial and error and some research, I learned some ways to help talented people work together. And that's what I want to share with you today, are some of the lessons I've learned in helping really intelligent, brilliant people work together. For this talk, I want to focus on 3 personality types. And these are kind of artificial constructs. They kind of overlap, but I think they help really make the points and help guide the conversation. So the 3 personality types I want to talk about are the idealist. That's the person who has these concepts in their mind of how everything could just be wonderful if we follow certain rules. And then the tech-focused person, and that's the person who just loves technology and drills into it. But when it comes to working with other people, it's a different story. And the last one is the dissenter. That's the person who just always says, no, we can't do that. No, we should do it the other way. No, we should do it this way. Those are the 3 personality types I want to focus on. And I thought when putting this together, I can't talk about the people that work for me directly. I can't, I'd love to tell you stories and say, well, Brandon did this and this is what it looked like. And oh, Stephen did this and that's what it looked like. But that, I really can't talk about that in that direction. But at the same time, I didn't want to make up stories because I'm bad at making up stories. So instead, what I want to do is I want to talk about three people that in my mind kind of embody these different personality types. So for the idealist, we're going to talk about Steve Jobs. For the technology focus, we're going to talk about Thomas Edison. And for the dissenter, the one that just disagrees with everybody in the whole world, we're going to talk about Galileo Galilei, who was so famous, we just call him Galileo. We don't even say Galilei anymore. Let's start by talking about the idealist. When I first started studying and preparing for this talk, I really didn't know much about Steve Jobs. I thought he'd be a good sample or example of idealism. And so I read the biography by Walter Isaacson, and I'm still not a great fan of him in some ways, but at the same time, I've really learned to appreciate a lot that Steve brought to Apple. Steve was, of course, the co-founder of Apple with Steve Wozniak. Steve Jobs was really the one who focused on design and promotion. Wozniak was the technical person. He's the one who knew how to put together the circuit boards and program computers. But Steve Jobs was one who had this concept, this idealism that really drove the design and the promotion of the products that they created. And his ideals focused on some of the concepts here: simplicity and minimalism, which he learned from some of his Zen Buddhist training and just a number of other areas that he went through in life. He learned things should be simple. Things should be as minimal as possible. He learned that ease of use, things should be easy to understand, that they almost self-explanatory, take advantage of existing metaphors, and you should be able to just pick something up and start using it. He learned from his father that things should be beautiful without and within, that the back of the fence should be just as beautiful as the front of the fence, that the inside of the computer should be just as beautiful as the outside of the computer. And he learned from a mentor of his this concept he called imputed value, which is the concept of elegance, that if you're going to present something, you want to present something in such a way that it just imputes this concept of elegance to it. So if you've got a beautiful computer, don't wrap it in a garbage bag and hand it to people. Wrap it in this beautiful box that is velvet lined. It just imparts that sense of elegance. So these were the ideals that Steve Jobs brought to his to Apple. The ideal of simplicity and minimalism, of ease of use, beautiful without and within, the elegance. This is what he brought, and this is what you see in the products that he helped develop. You see the Macintosh in 1984 compared with its competitor about the same time, the IBM PC. You look at it. It's got the ease of use. It's the first commercial computer that was an all-in-one like that. The first one that used a GUI interface and a mouse, compared to the old IBM PC, which just really honestly doesn't look nearly as pretty. The Macintosh is really what set Apple on the map. Well, the Apple II did too, I guess, but it really revived them and pushed them forward and really pushed together technology. This is Steve Jobs' design ideals coming to light. This is Steve Jobs' ideals coming to light in the iPod. You compare that to the Rio MP3 player, which came out about the same time. The Rio has dozens of buttons and just all sorts of things going on. The iPod, though, again, you've got this minimalism. One button and a wheel, and it's this ease of use. And Steve pushed really hard to make sure there are only 3 clicks to get to a song. You see this in the iPhone in 2007. Again, beautiful, beautiful design of this device. The BlackBerry was another popular phone at the same time. It's got all the buttons on here. You can do everything, but it's got a smaller screen. And the iPhone, again, just changed the whole world in so many ways. So this is Steve Jobs. This is what his idealism, his design concepts brought to Apple. Just amazing products. But the problem with idealism is, while it can be really amazing in certain areas, it can also be debilitating, because Steve Jobs helped create all of these products. But after 1984, after Steve Jobs was pushed out of Apple, Steve went to create his own company, a company that he called Next, and he made this computer. This is the Next computer. And At Apple, Steve Jobs had some limitations. He had to work with some other people who could say no, and he had to kind of cajole and work his way around. At Next, Steve Jobs had free reign. He could do whatever he wanted. He could make this as beautiful, as fantastic as he wanted. And so he did. It's this perfect square shape. Oh, it's so beautiful. Really expensive to make a perfect square shape, apparently, though, and not very efficient. And oh, it's got this optical drive inside. That is so cool and cutting edge and so much slower than the other technology, but it's pretty. He made this wonderful, and the factory. He built his own factory. He wanted the factory to be beautiful and painted a certain way and laid out a certain way. Steve Jobs let his idealism just run wild with this. Beautiful computer, inside and out. Perfect cube, made at a lovely factory. The education market that he was targeting was looking for a computer that was $2,000 to $3,000. When Steve was done with this product, the base price was $6,500. It launched in 1988. The factory he designed was made for 10,000 units a month. They only sold 400 a month. Striving for an ideal can be absolutely amazing. But the flip side is it can be also very debilitating. And that's what we see with our programmers. This is a table. And you guys that have worked with other programmers, you know, you ask a developer, hey, can you put a table on this page? You've got some developers who will just go, all right, there's your table. Here it is. We're all good to go. But then you've got other developers who will say, oh, you know, I started looking into this and I realized that, yeah, we've got this table, but it's pulling from data that's duplicated across tables. We really shouldn't have that. These tables really need to be normalized. And, you know, I was looking at the data that we're pulling, and some of this data doesn't look right. It looks wrong. We really should be validating this data. And, you know, I don't know if we need front-end validation. We probably need to go back in the back end and clean up the data that we've got, but we need to validate the data. And, you know, when I was starting to build this out, I noticed we've got some queries are in repositories, and we've got other queries in services. Where are we going to keep our queries? Shouldn't we standardize where we put our queries? And by the way, when I was starting to write my queries, I realized we don't have any tests in this code base. Shouldn't we be testing things? And oh, by the way, you know, this is a nice little table and it's using data tables, but we're on an old version of data tables. We're on like 1.10 and it's on 1.12, and we really should update. And our jQuery, that is out of date. We're on jQuery 1. We should be on jQuery. Well, I don't even know if we should be on jQuery 3. We should probably just refactor out of jQuery entirely, you know, because that's not where we want to go. Hey, you know, I noticed too, we've got this table here on this page, but on another page, we got a table that looks different. And then yet on another page, we got another table that looks even more different. You know, I think our tables need to be consistent. It would be really nice if we built like a table display template and we used it for all of our tables. And, you know, by the way, also our Bootstrap version, we're on Bootstrap version 3. That's not being maintained anymore. We should really update Bootstrap. I don't know if you guys can relate to this or not, but when you've got development teams, like I said, you've got the one guy who will go, okay, here's your table. And then you've got the idealists who are like Steve Jobs, and they come and they look at the table and they say, you know, I don't know about this. There are problems in the code. We've got this data duplication. We've got these inconsistencies. We've got these problems. And you're asking me to build on top of something that I think is not structurally sound. And what they're telling you is, look, I see these imperfections. I know we can't fix all of these right now. And they're realistic about it. I know we can't do all of these things. But what they're telling us when they pull these out is they're saying, look, I'm a professional. And I don't feel like this code base reflects my professional ethic, and I want it to. And I'm overwhelmed by all the different things that need to be fixed. And I don't know where to start, but I don't feel good about this because there's so much we need to be doing. It's the idealist. It's the idealist who's saying your code, our code should be better, but I don't know how to make it better. But I don't feel comfortable just leaving it like this. And we want that. We want that idealist to come and tell us those things. And that's where they need your help. They need the help of the leader to come in and say, you're right. There are a lot of things that need to be fixed. But we don't want you to go create the next computer. We got to find some way to turn this into a Macintosh or into an iPod or into something that's useful. So how do we help them? How do we help these idealists get past this breaking point of there's so much that needs to be fixed? I want to give you this table, but I just don't know how. I think there are a few things that I've learned in dealing with people who are idealists, and having been one myself every now and then too. I think the first concept is to help, we have to confirm what the ideals for the team are. You know, little Lego man here has his ideals of what's important in the code, and little Lego woman here has her ideals of what's important in the code. But we can't just say, well, you think it's really important that we have tests. You don't think it's important we have tests. Okay. What is our ideal? So as a leader on a team, the first thing that we need to do is we need to identify what are the ideals for our team, so that we're all on the same page, we're all moving in the same direction. And it's not just Mr. or Miss Idealist out there who's developing things and trying to make better. It becomes a team thing. Hey, we're all trying to make the code better. We're all in this together, and we all are moving in the same direction. So the first thing we need to do for the idealists is to confirm what the ideals of the team are. The second thing we need to do, and this has helped so much with my teams and my idealists, the second thing to do is simply capture the work that needs to be done. On the right here, we use Pivotal Tracker for our ticketing system, and that's what we do. Hey, look, we've identified, 9 things here that we really should be doing. I don't want to just forget about it. Let's turn each one of those into a ticket. So obviously the first ticket is we need to create this table display. Okay, that's a ticket. Let's make that a ticket. The next thing here, we need the idea of creating a table template. That's good. I like that. Let's do that. So make that a ticket. We need to normalize the database. That's a ticket. What we're doing when we do this is we're capturing the issues so that the idealists don't have to worry that they'll be forgotten. If we don't capture the issues, if we don't put it into a ticketing system, then what happens is the idealist stumbles on something and says, look, I realize we are not standardizing our query location. And I've had idealists who will go and spend their whole weekend working through the code to standardize the query location because they're worried. If they don't do this thing now, it'll never get done, but they know it needs to be done. And they don't have any other way to make sure that the code will be improved. So it's very important that we capture the work, that we say, okay, you're right. You found things that need to be done. Let's capture this and put it in our ticketing system. And it's gotten to the point where my developers will do that themselves. And you can just see the relief. Hey, I found this and I put it in the ticketing system. The next thing that we need to do is we need to prioritize. If you're the leader of the team, it's your responsibility to figure out, what do we do now? What do we do later? So in this situation, I'm going to make that balance. I'm going to try to find a way to figure out what should we do now so that we can improve the code, and at the same time not build on something that's we're going to have to refactor later, but not get ourselves stuck in a quagmire. This is an easy table. It should be done by the end of the day, Tuesday. We really don't need to spend a lot of time on it. So what I'll do is I'll find something that we need to do that they've suggested and try to pull it in now. Hey, you're right. We should have a table template. Why don't you create that table template and then put this table on top of that template? But I don't want you to create a table template and go back and fix the code everywhere. What I want you to do is, from now on, every time we touch a table, we convert it to the template. So what I'm doing is I'm saying, you're right. You've got some important points of things we need to fix. We're going to remember those. Right now, we're going to introduce one of those, and we're going to get the work done that needs to be done by Tuesday. Lastly, we want to iterate towards the ideal. And I think this is the most important point on this. We've said, hey, this is our ideal to improve the code. We've said this is very important to us. We've let them put the tickets in the ticketing system. What we have to do now is we have to actually keep our promises and start iterating toward that ideal. So ticket 1012, add a column to an old table. Hey, you're fixing an old table. Don't forget, use the new table template. Ticket 1016, you're creating a read-only view. Hey, you know what? You talked about we need to start writing tests. You're exactly right. I think this read-only view is a great place to introduce that. Let's start writing tests on this ticket. There's the bug here with the user cannot load the page. That's a problem with the data. We've talked about that. Let's pull up validate the data. And then sometimes I will put in a ticket that is specifically, we need to update jQuery and data tables, but it doesn't have to be a ticket that's just, oh, we got to get this in our sprint this week. Sometimes it's just adding those other ones on. And then if we're creating a new feature that's pretty big, I might pull in some of the bigger issues like updating Bootstrap or writing additional tests. The idea is that we've made a promise to these people who are idealists. We've promised to help them incrementally iterate toward the ideal. And it's our responsibility to keep that promise and to keep coming back and saying, you know what, we've got to move towards the ideal. And the more we do that, the more they trust us, the more they understand we're all working together, the better they feel, the better the code comes, the better we all work together. So working with idealists. Idealists want to achieve an ideal, but they really need help balancing the current priorities with their future vision. Your job, if you're the team leader, is to navigate the team toward the ideal, discussing and agreeing on team ideals, capturing the work to be done, prioritizing the implementation, and iterating towards the ideal. All right, let's talk about tech-focused people. So many tech people suffer from too much focus, and we're going to talk about in this one, Thomas Edison. Reading about Thomas Edison, I'm just blown away. I did not realize what all Thomas Edison did. I associated him with improving the light bulb, but wow, he just did so much. He was a technician's technician. He just loved to learn about technology. He invented the phonograph, he improved the light bulb, and not only that, but also helped him create the electric infrastructure that allowed you to turn on a light bulb. He went into this whole mining venture and spent years and millions of dollars on mining and became a cement manufacturer. He worked in fluoroscopy with x-rays. He helped develop a storage alkaline battery. He was just a tech guy par excellence. Just amazing. He was obsessed with learning and creating practical solutions. He could talk for hours about his technology. He would go to his lab and he would zone in, and he would work for days without end in the lab. And he would just crawl under the bench or whatever and take a nap at 2 in the morning and wake up 2 hours later and keep going. Just loved technology. But you know, if you're spending your nights at the lab and your family is just a few hundred yards away, that means you're probably not doing a great job with your personal relationships. And that's true of Thomas Edison. Some wonderful stories in his biography. Well, they're wonderful. They're not, oh man, they're just rough stories. Anyways, one of them, Thomas Edison, when he was younger, he was swimming with a friend of his named George Lockwood. Lockwood went underwater. Lockwood did not come back up. Edison got tired of waiting for him and went home. And later that night, Lockwood's parents came. Hey, where's George? We've missed him. And Edison told them, well, he went underwater. I got tired of waiting for him. I came home. The boy and his family, or the boy's family, went and they drug his dead body from the stream because he had drowned. This was Edison's concept of people. He inconvenienced me. It's not, oh no, my friend is drowned. Oh, this is horrible. I got to go tell somebody. I got to go save him. There's no thought for his friend or his friend's family. It was just that George had inconvenienced him and he went on home. When he was proposed to his first wife, Edison was about 24 years old. She was about 16 years old. They had been courting for a little bit, and he went to her one day and said, you know, have you thought about getting married? She said, no, not really. And he said, well, I have, and I'd like to get married. And she said, well, I'm only 16. I'm too young to get married. He said, you didn't say no. You know, if you had meant no, you would have actually said no, but you didn't. So I'll talk to your dad and we'll get married on Tuesday. Again, no real understanding that another person has another point of view. Kind of a challenge there for him. And one of his aides ended up saying, Mr. Edison is fortunate among other men in having been born without feeling. So Edison, just fantastic with technology, really not good with people. And when you think about some of the people on our teams, you can recognize various degrees of people who are like this. They're just incredible with technology. But when it comes to people skills, they're not so good. Robert Martin in The Clean Coder said, we didn't become programmers because we like working with people. No, as a rule, we find interpersonal relationships messy and unpredictable. We like the clean, predictable behavior of the machines that we program. And that's what we see on our teams a lot. We see these people who are just really engrossed in technology, but then when it comes to working with other people, they really struggle. They're not good at small talk. You know, you say, "How was your day?" And they'll go, "Okay." And they don't know how to continue the small talk from there. Or they'll start telling you about their train set, and they'll spend 15 minutes with a monologue telling you about their train set. They don't know how to have small talk. If they have any conversations, very limited to technical topics. And even in that, they show no empathy for others. If somebody else is crying or distraught or whatever, they kind of keep to themselves and don't know how to show any empathy or understanding that the other person doesn't want to hear 15 minutes of talk about your model trains. They assume that other people understand their perspective, that other people are inside their head, and sometimes they'll pick up conversations in the middle or explanations without telling you the context. They'll just start talking. Well, this didn't work, and and you don't even know what they're talking about. They're very wonderful when it comes to technology, but when it comes to interpersonal things, it's kind of like Edison with his wife. Not really good at the small talk, not really good at the empathy. We see this too when it comes to larger meetings, when it's a meeting with stakeholders. There's a concept sometimes that we should get the most knowledgeable person to be in the room with the stakeholders. And a lot of times that most knowledgeable person is one of our developers. And a lot of times it's one of our developers who's not good with people. But we say, no, we need the expert in the room. And what happens is we put the expert in the room and they don't understand how to talk to the people in the room. They're blind to the big picture, and they get frustrated. So if the stakeholders say, well, how's it going? And what are you working on now? The developer might start talking about, well, you know, we've decided that Gulp is outdated. Instead of Gulp, we're going to start working on moving to Webpack, which I think will be a positive, even though Webpack, you know, might have its issues. We might use Encore. They start focusing on trivial details, not understanding what the stakeholders need to hear. At Gulp to Webpack might be really nice, or to Encore or whatever. But these are the stakeholders and they want the bigger picture. And they struggle with that. Sometimes you get the developers who come in who are really disrespectful to people with less technical skill and just treat them derisively as if they're ignorant in general. Well, you don't even know how the internet works. Why should I bother to explain this to you? So you get people who are very tech focused but struggle with the stakeholders. And on their side, there's the question of what if communication is not your skill? You know, from their perspective, ambiguity is confusing. You know, people don't always exactly say what they mean. They kind of hint at what they mean, and that's not helpful. You know, if you should say, hey, we should work on this. Okay, does that mean we need to work on it today? Does that mean I need to work on this? What does work on this mean? Does it mean we think about it or plan for it? This ambiguity can be really confusing. And then when you ask them questions, they struggle to give really accurate responses. They want to be technically precise. So if you ask them, like, how many users have you had, and you know, how many users do you get to your website typically? They won't give you a nice round number like the last session we have 2 million users roundabout. They'll sit there and say, let me check. Well, now I just need a round number. Are we about 100,000, a million, 100? Where are we? I don't know. Let me check. They want to be very accurate with their responses, and so they'll take a long time to think about it. And finally, they don't always understand other people's point of view very well. And they're uncertain how people will respond. You know, one person will say something and get a laugh, and this tech-focused person will say exactly the same thing, and people just look at them odd. They're like, well, other people laughed at the other person when they said it. Why don't they laugh at me? So communication is not your skill. It can be challenging. So what do? I mean, these are people that we've got on our teams, and you may recognize these kind of people. They're fantastic with technology when it's all written out and scripted and rational, but they really struggle with people. So how do we help? First of all, we have to be very precise as leaders. We have to be precise in our language. You know, like I mentioned a minute ago, you can't just say, let's do this soon. And I was bad about this. I was really bad about this. I was afraid as a leader sometimes to kind of just, okay, I'm going to tell you, you're going to do this. You're going to do this by Friday. I felt like that was kind of being pushy. But it's not. It's being clear. So the first thing is we've got to be precise, not let's do this soon. It's, okay, Mike, can you have this done by Friday at 3 o'clock? I'm telling you who's going to do it. I'm going to tell you what the priority level is and when I expect it to be done. And that's not being rude or bossy. That's being clear. Because I might say, okay, it's not Mike that's going to do this. It's Ryan that's going to do this. And I want him to have it done at Friday. You release that ambiguity by precision. Don't say that. I've had directors, and you all have too, who will send emails that are a little bit veiled, but you know what they're saying. You know, you say, hey, we've got these two options. And their response is, I like this option. Is that a yes? We need to be clear. That's a yes. So don't just say, well, I like this option and expect them to know what that means. Say yes, say no, be precise in your language. Don't just say that's an interesting idea. Identify what you want them to do. Well, that's interesting, but we're not going to do that. That's interesting. Let's research that more. That's interesting, whatever. Finally, you know, I found this out a lot with our tickets, that we have some relationships really with our stakeholders on most of the teams. And the stakeholders don't always know exactly what they want, or they're kind of vague. And they would say, can you create a pop-up for this survey? And some of the guys can handle that ambiguity. Others just can't. And what we'd have to do is, here's a screenshot. Here's a mock-up. This is what you're building. So for folks who struggle with people skills, be very precise in your language. Next thing is be predictable. I had a developer that every time he would come into a Scrum meeting, it took me a while to realize this, he had written out what he needed to say. I could not just off the cuff say, hey, can you tell me about this? He needed time to think about it. So it's our job to be predictable. You know, we've got our 3 Scrum questions. What happened yesterday? What's happening today? What are your blockers? That's predictable. In weekly one-on-ones, they need to know what to expect. If there's some changes that are coming down the pipeline, they need to be aware of them before they come, so they can start thinking about what the changes might do. If I need to call them for a special meeting, I've got to be very specific about, here's the reason I'm calling you. I want to meet with you this afternoon to talk about whatever. Be predictable. Finally, if you've got situations where you have developers and you have stakeholders, make sure that you're providing the stakeholders with a human to programmer interface. You need somebody who speaks both technical and speaks stakeholder. So don't try to get the expert to sit in if communication is not their skill. That frustrates them and it frustrates the stakeholders. What we need to do instead is provide somebody who can be on both sides of that and can mediate and translate. It's the human to programmer interface. So that's our tech-focused person. Tech-focused people love working with technology, but they really need help working with other people. We cannot improve their people skills. And I've tried, and we'll talk about that if we have time a little bit later. But you're not going to improve their people skills, so don't push there. Instead, what we need to do is create an environment where they can succeed. So your job is to help improve their interactions by being precise and explicit in your speech, making expectations predictable, providing a strong communicator to facilitate communication in larger groups. All right, let's close out talking about the dissenter, a little bit of disagreement. Galileo, of course, lived in a time when everyone knew that the sun and stars revolved around the earth. Well, duh, it's just obvious. I mean, the earth isn't moving. You go outside and it's not moving. So everyone just knew that. It was obvious. Copernicus in 1543 suggested maybe it went the other way. Maybe the earth circles around the sun, you think? Copernicus died right after he made that suggestion. He kind of waited until the end of his life to make that suggestion. So he didn't really face any pushback. Galileo, however, created a telescope that allowed him to see more than people have been able to see before. And through his observations, he came out and he said, you know, I think Copernicus is right. The earth circles around the sun. He said that in 1615. In 1616, the very next year, the church, which was kind of in control of Italy at the time, the church turned around and told Galileo, never hold that thought again. They didn't say, well, that's an interesting concept. You know, Copernicus said that. We should consider that. What they said is never hold that thought again. And Galileo was thankful they had not been more cruel to him. A few years later, with the Pope's permission, Galileo actually was allowed to hold that thought again. He published a book arguing that the earth circles around the sun. This time he was sentenced to house arrest, and he spent the last 8 years of his life under house arrest. The world believed that the earth everything circled around the earth. Galileo thought it was different. He had his observations. He had reasons for thinking it was different. They didn't listen to the reasons. They told him to shut up and be happy that we're not doing something worse to you. Even though he was right. We have dissenters among our programmers too. We've got programmers who are willing to say things that everyone else disagrees with. They'll challenge conventional wisdom. Conventional wisdom is you should use frameworks. Don't reinvent the wheel. These folks will come and say, I don't know if we should use a framework. Maybe we shouldn't. You know, hey, we'll say, don't reinvent the wheel. And they say, sometimes you should. They'll start asking hypothetical questions about possible scenarios. Well, what if? What if Google fell down? What if there was a fire at our hosting center? What if? And they just stir up trouble, it seems like, to us. So how do you handle these people? Because these people are important to our team. They're bringing up things that may bug us sometimes, but at the same time, they're doing something very important. And I think that's what we need to recognize. We need to recognize how valuable these people are to our team. There was a behavioral study. Absolutely love. This is so cool. There were 5 people who were actually in on the study, and the little blue man down here, he was clueless. He was the subject under test. So they had 4 lines that they were showing, and they just asked a question, which line is the longest? Well, if you look, B is the longest line. Well, it's just obvious. B is the longest line. But one by one, the people who were in on the study would say, nope, D is the longest line. No. The blue man's thinking, no, D's not. Maybe they heard the question wrong. Then the second person, D is the longest line. And the third person, D is the longest. The fourth person, D is the. I mean, after 5 people had said D is the longest line, that poor blue guy was confused. And a majority of the time, just because he was confused and wanted to conform with the group, that guy ended up saying, yep, you're right, it's D. He knew D was the wrong answer, but he said it anyways because everybody else was saying it. But if one person disagreed, if one person would stand up and just say, no, it's not D, it's A. Well, okay, she's totally wrong. It's not A. We know she's totally wrong. But having one person disagree, that person was willing to say, no, it's B. Breaking that conformity, having one person who is just willing to say, I disagree, makes a huge, huge difference. I've got a lady that I work with. She talks about the way she handles this, how important this is on her teams. She says if they're all sitting around agreeing, she will appoint one person and say, you know, Jennifer, I need you to disagree because everybody's agreeing and I can't have that. And she does that just so they can get better results. You've got to have somebody who disagrees, even if they're wrong, because they help us think through things that we need to be thinking about, like maybe the earth does rotate around the sun. There's another thing for us to do is to find the compromise. And this is so important. In Wisdom of Crowds, James Surowiecki tells the story of a contest to guess the weight of a cow after it had been dressed or slaughtered. Folks had to pay to guess the weight. And a statistician was very interested in this. He said, I wonder if we just took all the guesses and averaged them, how close would that be? Because his concept was that the average person is just stupid. So he took all of the guesses and he averaged them. The cow, when it was dressed, actually weighed 1,198 pounds. The average, when they averaged all the guesses, was 1,197 pounds. The average was 1 pound off. And here's the thing. Nobody was right. Some people were too high. Some people were too low. But you need that tension. And we need that diversity of each person having their own point of view, that independence of being able to share that thought. And we need it because the people who are too high need to pull up the people who are too low, and the people who are too low need to pull down the people who are too high. And it's finding that compromise in the middle. So when you've got the dissenter who's saying, I disagree, maybe we shouldn't use a framework. The important thing for us to do is to listen and to figure out what they're saying, because a lot of times the value lies in the middle right there. There's a wonderful quote here. The best decisions are a product of disagreement and contest. I just love that. Finally, leading dissenters promote mutual purpose. We all come from different backgrounds, different skills, different ideas, different approaches. We have different thoughts. Our common goal is the same, though. We all want mutual success. Nobody on the team wants the business to fail. Each of us is trying to help in our own way. It just looks a little different. So promote the concept that we are all working together, even though we may do things a little bit differently. So working with dissenters. Dissenters are people who are willing to disagree when others won't disagree, but they risk being alienated or being silenced, and we can't have that. Your job is to help the dissenters by encouraging respectful disagreement, finding the compromise when possible, and promoting mutual purpose. All right, a couple slides to wrap up here. The dream team, this team that had all of this talent, this team that lost their first game despite all of that talent, they did go on to win every game by a lot at the Olympics. But it took leadership to get them to work together. On your team, you've got your dream team. You have brilliant developers who need your help to be a successful team. You've got your idealists, you've got your tech focused, you've got your dissenters. If you can figure out how they work and help them to work together, then you can help them become a successful dream team. I've got a bibliography in the slides here that I'll share. I will note one thing here, a couple things. It's this book called Employer's Guide to Managing Professionals on the Autism Spectrum. Just really blew me away. There is some correlation between people and technology and being on the autism spectrum with some people, I think. And seeing that and studying that, just, wow, I recognized a lot of folks I work with, and it really helped me work with them. So a number of other really good books here that I highly recommend. And that's me, and that's my talk. This is the link to the joined in. As Cal has said, if you could leave comments or feedback, I would highly appreciate it. This is something I've been studying and working on for a long time, and really anxious just to hear what y'all think. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bryce. That was very good. I've been managing for a while now and speaking on management, and we share a lot of the same thoughts. And I picked up some new ones along the way in this talk. So thank you so much for that.